Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Tuesday, October 4th, and I hope you all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world. So stay tuned. As always, I'll start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we will go to Allen, where he will speak with Casey Rosenthal, CEO and co-founder at Verica, about Verica's launch of Prowler Pro SaaS. Then Mitch will speak with Tony Lauro, Director of Security Technology and Strategy at Akamai, to discuss 3 of the key obfuscation techniques that attackers are using to break down defenses and exploit systems through undetectable means. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars we have. Next up, we are airing episode 1 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. Mitch will then sit down with Mario Espinosa, Chief Product Officer at Illumio, to discuss Illumio's Zero Trust hybrid product strategy and the announcement of their endpoint security solution. After that, Mitch will meet with Simon Jelly, Technology's General Manager of SaaS Protection at Veritas, to share tips for organizations and CIOs to harden their security by better managing the cloud shared responsibility model. Then, to wrap up this broadcast, we have 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first, Mike interviews Order CEO Greg Murphy, where Greg explains what makes IoT security so challenging. Then, Mike interviews Maitan Marfatia, CEO at Evolveware, as Maitan explains why application modernization needs to be viewed as a continuous process. And that's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for October 4th. First up, Google has discontinued its Google Translate service in mainland China. This is one of Google's last remaining services that was still provided in the country. The app and the website will now direct Chinese users to its page in Hong Kong, which is blocked in China. Google has stated that the service was discontinued in China due to its low use, but Google has always had a difficult relationship with China, starting back in 2010, when Google pulled its search engine after it was unwilling to abide by China's censorship rules. Next, India has announced its launch of 5G. The launch will happen in select cities and will eventually expand to the entire country in a move to provide seamless coverage, less delay in internet connectivity, and highly reliable communications. The government has stated that the economic impact of 5G on India is expected to be $450 billion by 2035. And with projections of over 369 million subscriptions, India will be just behind China and the US in world rankings of 5G by 2026. In other news, Meta has announced its Make a Video project, which turns text prompts into video. While we have all seen the text-to-image models before, such as DALL-E, moving from stills to moving images is a difficult challenge for machine learning. Meta has stated that the Make a Video follows a similar model to creating images. It will first create the image and then determine what the following frame should look like. That being said, the Make a Video project is currently not available to the public and is still being tested, but several example videos have already been released. Next, Cloudflare is in the process of testing a new kind of CAPTCHA that tests your browser instead of you, so the days of clicking on stoplights could rapidly be coming to an end. The test, which is called Turnstile, will apply one of several browser challenges, including proof of work, proof of space, and probing for web APIs to look for human behavior. According to Cloudflare, Turnstile will dramatically reduce the time it takes to complete a test, down to 1 or 2 seconds, from the average of 32 seconds it takes to complete a CAPTCHA. Turnstile is now available to use in beta form for everyone. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at how hackers are using Telegram, Signal, and the dark web in order to aid the efforts of Iranian protesters. With Iran's telecommunications sector being entirely state-owned, several anti-governmental groups are using these tools to avoid state censorship. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. On Container Journal, we have an article looking at a survey on cloud-native apps and IT data. From a survey of over 1,300 CIOs and senior IT practitioners, 71% believe that the explosion of data from cloud-native technology is beyond our ability to manage. More concerning, the respondents noted that they only have observability across 9% of their environments. To learn more about the findings of this survey, go to containerjournal.com. Finally, on DevOps.com, we have an article looking at how Cosmonic has previewed a deployment platform for WASM apps. Cosmonic has stated that the platform will help developers experiment with this new type of software to build a new class of cloud-native applications. To learn more about Cosmonic's platform preview, go to DevOps.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. I'm happy to be joined by a regular on our show. It's my friend Casey Rosenthal. He's the CEO, co-founder of Verica. Lots going on at Verica. Casey's going to tell us about it. Good morning, Casey. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Alan. Good morning to you, and great to be talking to you again. Absolutely.
Are you up home in Maine or on the road?
I am. Yep. It's a beautiful fall day. So I'm up here in Maine. The apples are ripe, and so I'm I'm in a good position.
Great time of year, fall. Yeah.
Yeah. Leaves will start turning any day now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good for you. Anyway, hey, we haven't had you on for a Verica update. Probably, I'm going to guess a couple months now.
Yep.
Why don't you bring us up to date, if you would?
Sure. Yeah. So we got a lot going on with Prowler and Prowler Pro. If anybody's following our repo on GitHub for Prowler, you can probably kind of guess with the changes we've made foundationally for version 3, which is on the horizon, that we've made a lot of performance improvements and expansion for the functionality. But what I'm really excited to announce is we've created a free tier community SaaS around Prowler. So we're taking the open source package, which we're still 110% invested in, and the adoption there has just been bananas. The GitHub stars. Thank you everybody for those. Over 6,500 now. Millions of downloads. It's just really taken off open source. But that's if you want to download that, add your own checks and instrument it into your system, it's great for that. What we found was there's a lot of people out there who I can relate to. I was a contractor, a consultant for about a decade in a former life. And I built mostly content management applications for my customers. So, I'd build them the application. I'd get them set up. Usually I'd use their credit card to sign up for, hosting and DNS and all of the different services that you need to run an online application. And the thing that I didn't really have at the time back then was a similar, SaaS subscription security service that I could sign them up for. And so that's what we're providing. Right now we've got it's just a free tier. So you just put your AWS credentials in, it's agentless, and it'll start scanning and present you with the dashboards. So even if you don't know a lot about security to begin with, you can get off and running, and it just kind of makes AWS security real easy. And brings all of the power of Prowler, the 250 plus checks into the SaaS, so that you get all of that exposed to you in a dashboard. Of course, again, for the beginners, what you're initially going to be looking at is checks passing versus checks that don't pass, or the critical ones in particular. So over time, what you want to see is the green line go up and the red lines go down. And so, it's just giving people kind of that very intuitive, easy way to get started with security. So we're real excited that we're able to, bring this back to the community and expand the reach even further.
So that's one of the promise. It was the promise of SaaS, right? To be able to have something like this. Unfortunately, we've probably been in this SaaS-y world now for 5, 6, 7 years, right? And Casey, a lot of products just don't deliver on that promise. Right? It's more than just hosting it externally. It's the ease of use. It's the, hey man, I set it up. It sets up really quick. Everything's back on on the back SaaS end. And it just works. It works. It's like auto magic, right? It works. And and it's intuitive, and it's all about the UX, right?
It is. And developer UX, right? So we at RSA and some of the other big conferences, I think last time I saw you in person was at RSA. A lot of buzzwords in the exhibition hall there. DevSecOps is obviously a huge both word for marketing, but also a lot of people are taking it seriously and trying to develop that capability further. And we think we can contribute to that. Because this is a tool that was developed by somebody who actually was facing the problem and built the tool to solve that problem. Tony, when he started Prowler 7 years ago now, was a one-man security shop, and so he had to build these checks to automate his job, to get his job done. And the project never lost that focus. So to be true to that, our company mission and our goal with Prowler is to stay focused on that, the practitioner. And what's interesting to us is there really aren't a lot of practitioner-led or product-led growth products in the security space. Most of it is, sold top down. And so most of it focuses on, CISO goals, which is great. There's a place for that. But in other places in infrastructure, you've really seen software take leaps and bounds forward, focusing on that practitioner first approach, the developer's UX. And that really changed the whole infrastructure world with Kubernetes and observability and all the stuff going on over there. So we think the time is right for that to really take hold in security as well. We're just super excited to be part of that, and kind of helping instantiate DevSecOps as a real force for change.
Absolutely. You mentioned RSA. We're actually in the middle of talking to RSA about DevSecOps for next year there, and maybe we'll do something on this there. But an interesting thing, Casey, I sit in a chair here, but it's like I have the best seat in the house, right? I see everything passing. Some trends I've seen coming through. One is, we got to stop burdening the developers. They have too much on their plate already. And the old story, this is the smallest violin in the world playing Hearts and Flowers.
Yeah.
I mean, developers make a lot of money. Top developers get paid really, really good. I've never met a developer who raises their hand and says, geez, I'd like to develop low-quality, security-addled code that's full of vulnerabilities, right? They all have great pride in it's craftsmanship. It's, So anything we could do that'll help them. make more secure code, I think is welcomed. But I've seen surveys where 40% of developers say we have enough on our plate. Yes, they have enough on their plate, but they don't want to develop insecure code, right? I think there's a disconnect there. I recently saw an article, and it was a sponsored article. And there was a little clickbaity, but it said something like, DevOps is dead, platform engineering. That's the new cool thing now.
Sure.
Right? You've got SREs, and now it's platform engineering. Because these developers have too much on their plate. I think, for a long time, people said DevSecOps wasn't real. It was marketing. It was nonsense. I think we've realized how real it is, and that shifting left and giving developers the tools to develop more secure code is a win-win-win all around.
Yeah, it's that last part that you said. It's not that developers have too much on their plate and adding security is adding another thing on their plate. Securities are already on their plate. They just don't have the tools to do the security part well.
Because they were security tools, not developer tools.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So give them the tool, give them the information, they're going to make better decisions. The same is true about availability and cost, by the way. So it's not that security is special. It's just, and those are two things where, there's also a lot of great innovation in tooling. But the things that our programs do well right now are the things that developers kind of have that firsthand experience. When Kubernetes started coming up out of the mists a few years ago, there were a lot of jokes about like, oh yeah, well, all these developers are deploying Kubernetes clusters, before they need to. Well, yeah, but Kubernetes made it easy to do that. They had a good dev UX to do those things. So then it was easier for them to, so they did more of it. If we have better security tools, they'll do more of it.
I agree.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir here, but nevertheless, there are these voices that persist. Let's look at the business aspect of it, Casey. So this is available, if they're watching this now, it was announced, it's available now. How do people sign up? How's it priced? What's the deal?
So right now, it's free. You basically just go to prowler.pro, you sign up. It takes 5 minutes to go from sign up to seeing dashboards running against your system. So you just follow directions on the site. It's super easy. You put in your AWS credentials so that it can hit the AWS API, and then it starts feeding the dashboards. And again, in a few minutes, you'll have a holistic view of the security of your cloud footprint. We've got a lot of great features we're going to add in the coming months. You can imagine our roadmap is pretty full and and exciting for as far out as we can see. But one of the other things that's great about putting this in a SaaS is we can see millions of people downloading the open source package and using that. And, of course, we want to continue supporting that. And we do. But it's hard to understand how people are using it if they're just downloading it and we never hear from them again. So this is also another great way for us it's not just, we're offering them more convenience and we're expanding the community that way. It also creates a better channel for us to hear back from people like, oh, they're more interested in the pen testing checks. We see those get run more often. Well, then we can, put more resources and rally the community more around that type of thing and make the product even better that way. So this is just going to open up a whole new world for us in terms of, what Prowler can do, and where we can take it. So it's pretty cool.
Very cool.
So I just want to make clear, though, people should go to Prowler Pro, or should they go to Verica?
Prowler.pro. You can get to it through Verica.io as well, but it's just Prowler.pro. Really easy to just put in your email, create a password, and sign up, and point it towards your AWS account, and you'll see the results.
Excellent, man. I love it. Sounds like a great thing. Casey, beyond Prowler Pro, I want people to be aware Verica does more than just Prowler, right?
Yep.
You're one of the pioneers in chaos engineering. And for people who may not be familiar, we should have probably done this in the front end of the interview, but we're going to do it on the back end instead. Give them a little background.
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, my background is in chaos engineering. I wrote the definition and co-wrote the book and started the conferences on it. Verica, basically has three products at this point. We've got a continuous verification platform focused on Kubernetes and Kafka. Our kind of flagship deal that we're able to talk about there is with Dish Networks. So they're the fourth big cell service provider in the US. They chose Verica as their continuous verification platform. So that's really cool too. We're doing a lot of cool stuff to verify call quality. And all of their new 5G infrastructure is running on Kubernetes and Kafka. So that's awesome. Our second area is the Void. So the Void.community.
Yes.
You can see our incident database. Is kind of a byproduct of our work on the continuous verification platform. We did all this research on how can things go wrong with Kubernetes and Kafka, and there's obviously a big connection with chaos engineering there. And we gathered so much data, other people started seeing value in that data. So we put together a research team that creates a report, an annual report, the Void report. And now there's a community service there, a subscription service for companies where they can participate in incident analysis, incident review, and kind of hone their skills around incident remediation and stuff like that, as well as get access to certain data products in the report. And then the third component is Prowler Pro, which is where the majority of our focus is right now, just because it's so fun.
Cool, man. I love it. Hey, I hope we don't have to wait till RSA in April to see you in person. Maybe, are you going to be at KubeCon?
Not KubeCon, because it overlaps with QCon. Ironically enough,
how cool is that?
Year.
Okay,
yeah, but I'm sure I'll see you soon at one of these.
Okay, Casey Rosenthal, CEO, co-founder of Verica, talking about the new SaaS hosted version, Prowler Pro. Really simple. If you are on cloud, you want to get serious about cloud security, even if you're not an expert, but you're a developer who wants to, go check it out. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Techstrong TV.
This is Techstrong TV.
I have the great pleasure of being joined by Tony Lauro. Tony is Director of Security Technology and Strategy at Akamai. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Always love talking to you. Would you just do an introduction of yourself? Tell us about you. And I hope everybody knows who Akamai is, but maybe you say something about your part of Akamai.
So I've been with Akamai for about 9 years. I've been in InfoSec and security since the late 90s when I worked for a US-based telecom provider. Basically, at any role that I've ever had, I'm always looking for the security angle. How can we make security better? How can we improve what we're doing? And now I get to do that at Akamai, not just for our clients, but for the products that we're developing to make sure that the direction we're going is into the future, not the past.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's great talking with you. And so much traffic flows through Akamai's network. Of course, you see a lot of things. I've talked to different researcher folks there about all the great things that you see in trends. So we were going to talk about obfuscation and some of the techniques that or applications of obfuscation. that folks are using. Of course, the hardest things is the fixes or block or whatever, or the ones you don't know about, right? So kind of undetected is obviously a goal of any exploit hackers that are trying to exploit that. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, it's as I said before, being in security for so long, you're kind of always preparing for something to happen. And lots of times it never happens, right? Like not every company you work for gets hacked or has a big incident. But since coming to Akamai, I've had the pleasure of kind of looking through data and sifting through data and working with customers who are getting hacked every single day, right? These companies are kind of the pinnacle of the companies on the web, on the internet. And then Akamai sits in front of them. So we're kind of the tip of the spear for this type of, malicious traffic. So what I thought would be interesting is to, instead of talk about, hey, all the great stuff, is to really look at, hey, what are some cases where we see where attackers are specifically saying, you have a control, a blue team control, and I, as an attacker, want to bypass that control. So lots of times they do it through obfuscation. One real quick instance is what I like to call a trusted site obfuscation, which in a sense, if I'm an attacker and I have a large scale attack campaign going on, there's two things I want to do. One, I want to make sure that my payload is as readily available as possible, right? So if I'm doing a remote file inclusion and I'm calling out to a malicious payload, or if I have malware drop that I want you to be able to download the payload, et cetera, I'm going to put that on a low cost CDN, or at least get it up into the cloud in some manner. So when I'm sending 100,000 emails or I'm doing a large scale attack campaign, the probability of that file being extracted, I don't want it to come back to some web server that I'm renting in some data center. I want it to be massively distributable.
Yep.
So we see attackers leveraging one, hosting their files up in the cloud somewhere, but two, directly calling exploit code from trusted sites like GitHub. So in this particular case I talked about at Black Hat, the URL is or the URI has a remote file inclusion vulnerability in it, and then the source equals is what you're going to be calling out to. Maybe you'd be calling out to a local file, or maybe to a remote website that you have access to. But in this case, they called out to raw.githubusercontent.com, and then the whole path to this PHP shell script, right? Mm-hmm. So this comes into play in a couple of ways. One, probably if you're looking through logs and you're looking at, URLs that are being accessed, you're probably not going to be blocking GitHub, right?
You have some unhappy developers. You do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it comes into this play where you really have to have that fidelity that when you're looking at remote file inclusion, what is the risk tolerance level there, and how many different ways and planes can you have identifiers that set off alarm bells and trigger and say, hey, even though this is a trusted site, this is a call out that may or may not have been caught in the first place. What is the adverse effect of that? So as the payload starts to execute into the web service, can you see that? Can you identify that? So that's one example. And we see the same thing, people scripting things from Google user content through Google Sheets. Another interesting case where they're sending Googlebot user agent. It's coming from Google IP space. But if you look closely, even though the header structure and everything matches, it's coming from a different, subnet within their AS number, and it's coming from a domain called Google User Content, not Google.com.
So is part of the point, Tony, that there are nuances like that of what the domain actually is that can tell you that it's maybe not what you think it is, but also that we do have to look at the payload, because that payload is referring to a PHP script or something else. Or some odd directory on some place where you're keeping code. Is that part of the point? You have to look at the payload too, just not headers of where things are coming and going.
Yeah, there's a lot of security controls that kind of work at this good enough level where you don't want to negatively affect the user experience. You want to negatively affect the business processes. So they're tuned in such a way that it really would have to be a very loud and obvious exploit for it to be able to be seen. In this particular case, especially if you have a safe list of sites that are used for callouts, this might go under the radar, and all the subsequent rule triggering would not happen because it's in a safe list, right? So
sounds like certificate authorities might be a good safe list of people to attack. If you can get in there, you can get to a lot of people, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Very interesting. And by the way, you mentioned your talk. This is content that you talked about at Black Hat, right? This year?
Yeah. And, again, it's kind of an interesting approach on the conversation. I feel like red team conversations get so much more hype than blue team conversations. And noticeably so because it's cooler, right? I'm sitting down with a client and we're going through all of this, these bypass techniques. And I'm like, look how cool that is. Look what they did. And they're like, it's not cool at all. And I'm like, well, it would be cool if it wasn't happening to you, right?
You have a warped sense of cool in their perspective, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's fun to walk through those things and to really make sure and identify not just what they've done in this particular instance from their own security configuration. As we create new tooling, are we doing them in mind of the TTPs and bypass techniques? We've got to make sure of that, of course.
It's that puzzle, that game of cat and mouse, right? That's the fun, the challenge of it, if you will, the intriguing part of it. Well, we'll talk about some other obfuscation techniques.
Yeah, well, one was kind of interesting. This was actually found by one of our security researchers, Larry Cashdollar. He got a phishing email that said, "Hey, your Google account has a problem," and he looked at first of all, the sender of the email was Facebook secure _Google at hotmail.com. I'm like, wow, they could not have messed this up any greater. But what's funny is if you were to click through the link on a mobile device, it takes you to a Google login page that has a Google certificate, looks legit. But if you were to log into it, it would be capturing data and sending it off via form email to the bad guys. But what they did here, which was interesting in terms of obfuscation, is they were taking their web page, running it through Google Translate. It was actually a website that was hosted on mediacities.co or something like that. But because it was running through Google Translate, if you were to look in a web browser, you've got your lock, you've got everything kind of looks legit. In fact, the beginning part of the URL says translate.google. So it's a valid, legitimate domain. But what it was presenting was the malicious phishing domain. Mm-hmm. So he was able to kind of obviously suss this out prior to, falling for it, and did a whole expose on why this was illegitimate. He even broke down the code in the phishing page that showed the scammer's email address. I think one of them even had like the scammer's name or handle to kind of further, research. And then the form that actually captures all the data, he was able to break that down and even show a sample.
Well, I know Larry just enough to know you don't mess with Larry when it comes to security. And
yeah, absolutely.
No doubt. Very interesting. Well, and again, it's that theme of trusted sites, right? Or what appears to be trusted sites, and which is in this case a phishing, exercise, but it's also that front end of that domain. And from a social engineering terminology, there was pretexting, which was kind of giving the context for why are you getting this message, and then some of the validation around, hey, there's a legitimate problem here, right? So pretexting and baiting, and the baiting part was saying, hey, there's a problem with your account, and you got to fix it right away. There's always, whenever there's an urgency to an email, you can almost 100% or maybe 98% assume that it might be some sort of phish or
or at least maybe a sales tactic at the very least. Like, don't miss, time's running out.
Urgent.
So
Quick.
yeah.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, exactly.
Those techniques. Okay, I think you had a third example.
Yeah, the third example, and this is something that is evolving kind of rapidly, is the idea of saying, hey, I want to look like a legitimate user so that I can buy goods from your online store. Whether this be, an $800 sweater that says the word no on it, some fancy, I don't know fashion well enough to buy something like that. But high-end retailers, shoe stores, shoe vendors directly, they're getting hit with this type of bot called an all-in-one bot. And we've talked about this, in the past before, but it was kind of interesting to look at just how detailed the bot mechanics are. One, they have full documentation that specify how to interact with the website you're about to attack. How their APIs function, what kind of information they're looking for. And then within the bot, program interface itself, it has different profiles for different payment cards. In case one fails, you can switch over, different shipping locales, and then different user personas, which I thought was really interesting because, again, your bot management is a very sophisticated field, much more now than it was, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But still, these things are very, very tricky because they're going through residential proxies. They're coming from home IP addresses. They're switching all the time. They're not sending more than a few requests from each residential IP at the same time. So now you have this real cat and mouse where the fidelity of you as a defender has to be, I absolutely cannot put a security roadblock in front of a good user who's buying something. But from the business aspect, I don't want to be the security team that let, all of our, high-priced game consoles go on the day of the launch, right? Or the shoes that just dropped or whatever. So and there's even things built in like captures, right? So people, and for years people have been saying, hey, I'm just going to put a caption in front of this. It can't be a bot if there's not someone to click through, they're using a bot, but it's a human-driven automated bot, right? So those responses for CAPTCHA come up, and they even have walkthroughs that say, hey, log into Google, log into YouTube with your Gmail account or a fake one, and then start watching YouTube videos because that gives you like user liveliness tokens so that when you get a CAPTCHA response, instead of saying, click on the boxes with the street sign, and you're kind of sweating because there's one box that has a little sliver of a street sign. It just says, I'm not a robot. And you just get the boom, you click, 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 click all the way down. And all of a sudden you bypass that security mechanism.
I think that's one of the things that many people don't. I mean, we should be able to say we can tell the difference between an automation, a bot, and when it's a human. And that line is definitely blurring by both the hybrid techniques you're talking about and even some of the automated techniques of really driven by a persona like you're talking about. Now it looks like a real buyer because they looked at, accessories after buying, something for their car that they might also add to it or whatever the products are.
Yeah. They moved around the walkthrough, the FAQ told them, hey, a few hours before the launch, go to the site, click around, show some activity, have some real liveliness on this site prior to, connecting with the bot, right? So they've thought of it all, but at any given moment, we're trying to stay one step ahead, how we're evolving those detection techniques. Even looking at things like, instead of saying, is this a human or is this a bot, validating, is this the right human? The last time Tony logged in, what did it look like when he logged in? Where did he connect from? And those are things that, as you're creating fake personas, are harder to replicate, especially when you mix things like account takeover. Am I logging in using stolen credentials for Tony's, online account, or is this a fresh account that was just made? Right. So tracking that is helpful. But again, they're always going to try something new, and that's the fun of the business. I'd say it's not fun, until you fix a problem, but it's fun to track that, right? So
you can say intriguing part.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I should probably back away from the word fun. Yes.
Well, I'm trying to lead you to there we go. Got your back on that, Tony. No problem. Well, it's been a pleasure. I love talking with you and kind of hearing about the latest things you're finding. And, it's just fascinating how many things are put together in new and different ways, or new techniques on top of old in this world that we live in of cyber attacks and defense. Yes. I know you all do a lot of research, probably have a lot of information that you publish. Where can folks go to on the Akamai site or someplace to find out kind of the latest blog information or whatever you might have available?
Yeah, so you can see what our security research team is up to if you go to akamai.com/security-research. We also have security blogs listed on akamai.com/blog/security. So a lot of really interesting stuff, and we're seeing malicious attacks, not just from the internet into companies, but with our zero trust portfolios and our install base, we're seeing real malware-driven attacks, lateral movement. We have a whole hunt team that's looking for this type of activity and reporting on it, and obviously protecting our customers against those attacks. So. Again, it's never a dull day at Akamai.
The most fun I have at RSA or Black Hat is when I get to sit down with one of the Akamai researchers and try to understand what they're telling me about.
Yeah, talk about an eye-opening experience, for sure.
It is. It definitely is. Well, thank you, Tony. Appreciate you joining us today. Folks, please check out Akamai sites that he mentioned. There's some great information, and they produce a quarterly report, a lot of good things about things that Akamai sees going across its network and security-related topics. So, Tony, come back again. Look forward to it.
I will. Thank you. Have a good day.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. So first up tomorrow, October 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern, Techstrong Research and Nirmata have partnered for a Pulse Meter survey report on top Kubernetes security concerns and how to address them. Increasingly sophisticated security threats can put applications and infrastructure at risk. This panel is here to bring you the good news on how to address these threats. As cloud adoption has skyrocketed, the need to manage cloud costs has become standard practice. Moving into an uncertain economy and a new fiscal year brings us together to revisit both our budgets and our security risks. So join us Thursday, October 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern for Kubernetes cost control strategies for 2023. And finally, following Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, AWS and PagerDuty have put together a hands-on workshop titled AWS Modernize Your Stack and Automate with PagerDuty. Led by solutions architects from AWS and PagerDuty, this workshop gives you the opportunity to test out the latest integrations in a sandbox environment. So that is all I've got for you right now, but we have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning, so stay tuned.
The Engineering the Change Scholarship Program offers a life-changing opportunity for a winner from an underrepresented community to change their lives by becoming a full-stack software developer.
The background that you might see that it's a weakness, it's a strength in this field because everyone is constantly looking for people that are going to bring new ideas.
It's an intense 12-week course that is not for the timid.
For real. Who's mastering this right now? Because I sure am not.
So you guys are badass. Like as a class, you guys are crushing it.
You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be ready to do it. Your life has to be ready for it. Follow us as we go through this cohort's Engineering the Change winner on their journey to becoming full-stack engineers.
Say with great power comes great responsibility.
We got to take it down to 3 finalists. Toria, I'm going to ask you, who really kind of stood out for you?
The 3 people that stood out to me the most was Stephanie and another woman named Carly and a man named Donald.
Mitchell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Actually, I think those are 3 great candidates, and I mean, you know very well, right, what it takes to go through this process.
Look, I still love good written and oral skills. I like people who can speak well. I like people who really could write well.
All right.
And I'm going to tell you something. To your point about Stephanie, is it Stephanie Sanchez? Yeah, Stephanie Sanchez. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring her into
the golden
finals.
buzzer. Right?
So,
she's in.
Yeah. The 2 other people you mentioned, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this.
Yeah.
She said something like, her brothers could do it, why couldn't she? Mm-hmm. Right? Wasn't that in the essay?
Yeah, that's something that stuck with me, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I think that for her, she was like, if they can do it, and there's not enough women in tech, like she was like, I can do it too, and I love that.
I say send Carly to Hollywood.
Golden buzzer?
Yeah. Donald Bazell, really nice guy. What I liked about his essay is his genuineness. Is that a word?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
being genuine.
He's genuine.
Yeah.
Right? You got it from him. My only caveat on this is he really doesn't have any tech experience.
Yeah.
So if it's your vote and Mitchell, you don't object, I say let's give Donald the last ticket to Hollywood. And those are our 3 finalists for Engineering the Change. Let's bring them in for interviews and pick our winner.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you on the next show.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
The great pleasure of being joined by Mario Espinoza. Mario is Chief Product Officer with Illumio. Welcome, Mario.
Thank you so much, Mitch. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Good to have you. So you've joined Illumio recently. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. I know you've been on Techstrong TV before, but let folks a little bit know about you. And of course, if you want to give kind of an overview of Illumio for folks that might not know them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Illumio 4 months ago. I'm super excited in the role of Chief Product Officer. So my role is to work with customers understanding their most fundamental cybersecurity challenges, and then work with a team of engineers to really find the best solution, the most cost-effective solution to their cybersecurity needs. So I've been in the cybersecurity industry for a while. So most recently, I was at Palo Alto Networks where I held positions both in product management and engineering.
Well, and a lot of things have happened at Palo Alto and Symantec where you were before. So you bring a wealth of experience, I'm sure, is valuable to the Illumio team. So we want to talk a little bit about innovation in the security space. And I almost said network security, but we kind of live in this world of software and network, and everything, right? Security. What are your thoughts about what do we need to be thinking about security now that maybe is different than what we thought about it 3 or 4 years ago?
Mitch, the world has changed dramatically from a technology perspective. So I think that the innovations in cloud and mobility have brought this hybrid world. I will say the world is hybrid right now. Customers have both on-premise infrastructure, but are also leveraging the cloud and mobile endpoints more and more. Because of that, the attack surface is bigger and bigger. And right now, the breach, I will say, is inevitable. You cannot stop the breach. You have to assume the breach and you have to contain it. I typically say there are 3 eras or generations in terms of cybersecurity. Number 1 was protection. Try to keep everything out. You try to have a perimeter, right? And defend that perimeter. That was the era of the blue box, right? The firewall. That was good. But the attackers became smarter and smarter, and they breached that perimeter. Then we went to the detection and response era, right? So the era of XDR, where they say, I'm going to chase these people very fast and try to stop them. That was good at that point in time, but it's not good enough anymore. Today, we are spending billions and billions of dollars. $170 billion is projected to be spent in cybersecurity in 2022, and breaches are still going to happen. So we need containment. This is the era of containment. So in addition to trying to prevent, trying to chase and detect and respond, you now have to have zero trust segmentation. And this is what Illumio does. We help people contain breaches so they don't become cyber disasters. Zero trust segmentation is there to protect you as a layer of defense, a most powerful layer of defense.
Yeah, I agree with the way you've described it too. And a lot of conversations that I'm involved in are all about moving out of the response mode into a continuous or a containment mode, because it isn't if you will be hacked or if you'll be breached. You probably already have, and you will. It's just a fact of life. I mean, things are all the software stack and the environment, the hybrid, the cloud, your environment, open source. You can name any attack vector that are outside of our control, as well as some that are in. And I think that's a big part of our situation too, Mario, is it isn't just our stuff that we have to protect or watch for vulnerabilities and attacks against. It's all the services, open source, all those things, the environment that we're in. So it's a much more complex world, especially for network security professionals, really becoming cloud and in some ways software security professionals too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Mitch. So, and I think that something that is changing as well is the type of attacks. Today, we see ransomware hitting people at a tremendous pace. So, according to ESG, 76% of the companies were attacked and hit by ransomware, despite all the investments that we have. Also seen attacks in critical infrastructure, right? So you heard attacks on pipelines, for example, energy company, and we're seeing more and more active actors. So the breach is a reality. And also because companies are hybrid, the cost of the breach is higher than ever before. So some studies say that a breach in a hybrid environment is more expensive, up to $600,000 more expensive than a breach in a non-hybrid environment. That's why Illumio is driving a zero trust segmentation solution. And we do that for your data center, your premise. We do that for your cloud. And now we're so excited because we're announcing zero trust segmentation protection for the endpoint. The endpoint is the point where most of ransomware attacks are generated. The compromise starts there. And the question is how you observe that, see the risk immediately, and you can apply policies and prevent this breach, this ransomware or other type of attack from going from endpoint to endpoint and infecting your entire network. And Illumio does that with an approach that is proactive because we segmented the environment before the attack comes. So zero trust is something that customers are searching more and more as a solution to this type of attacks.
I'm curious. So your customers are kind of getting their head around zero trust. And what does that mean for us? How do we think about the zero trust architecture for our security posture? How do you do that in a product company, in a security product company? In one way, you listen to your customers, you want to respond to needs and that they have. You also sometimes have to kind of think a point or two ahead in the future and say, well, let's be where the ball is going to be thrown, right? Let's build the product that they need today and in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months. How do you help an organization like a product company get into that mode of the next generation of security?
I think it all starts with a constant dialogue with the customer. And the customer is most interested in visibility. They need to understand what their infrastructure looks like and where these points where breaches can propagate lie. So for example, customers will ask Illumio, hey, help me understand what are all my assets, right? So my asset in the data center, in the cloud, could be AWS, GCP, infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, and my endpoints. For example, Illumio gets visibility into both Windows and Mac endpoints. So we cover all the estate of the customers, and we work with them, right? So customer will tell us, hey, I need, for example, risk visibility. I need to know what my endpoints are and what are the flows of network information between them, so we can define policies that prevent breaches from spreading from one endpoint to the other. So it's all about that constant dialogue with the users. We involve them in early stages of our development. For example, for endpoint, we had a panel of users that interacted with us very early in the cycle, and they tested prototype versions of our zero trust endpoint segmentation product. So with that quick feedback loop, we were able to achieve a solution that was addressing their needs in the most direct way. It's also important to work with them in terms of the simplicity of the solution. So usability is very important. So what Illumio is doing is we're simplifying zero trust segmentation. Zero trust segmentation is not a one-time effort. It's a multi-step effort. So people will say, hey, I want to protect my data center first. Then I want to protect my endpoints. Then I want to protect my cloud. So we walk with the customers through this journey of zero trust segmentation, make it simple, make it easier and manageable as they go through this journey.
Excellent. I'm curious, we live in a security world where we're always, do I buy from one company? Do I kind of build my own patchwork of solutions from best of breed, if you will, kind of that strategy? When it comes to zero trust and segmentation, I have to believe that you have some additional advantages of being able to do that in the cloud, do that in the data center, do that at endpoints, API security, different layers. How does that manifest itself in the products that Illumio is creating?
Mm-hmm. So customers want to have a comprehensive view of their environment. They don't want to have 10 different solutions. Cybersecurity has been very resilient to the changes in the economy recently that it is impacting all industries. However, they still want to consolidate vendors, and they still want to manage their cybersecurity budgets in the most efficient way. So Illumio brings that consolidation under a single console and single policy. So you don't have to rely on 10 different solutions for the different pieces of your infrastructure. Illumio will protect your endpoints with zero trust segmentation, your data center, your cloud, your OT, IoT network as well, and other pieces of the infrastructure. So our approach is to cover all portions of the estate with a unified console and policy.
Excellent. So one other question I'm always kind of working on is, how do we help security engineers, security leaders, CISOs evolve to be able to kind of wrap their arms around the software part of the world, right? Our organizations are creating applications, integrating with third parties. The stack in the data center is more than infrastructure software. It's entire containers and Kubernetes and lots of interesting things. How does Illumio approach that part of how do we help our customers with dealing with environments that are more than just protocols and traffic?
So cybersecurity in general, but especially zero trust segmentation, Mitch, I will say is a team sport. So no single company can say, hey, I can protect the entire environment. Customers will have an array of security solutions already installed. And nobody wants to come and install yet another cybersecurity solution, right? So what customers have told us over and over is leverage the existing infrastructure, integrate with that, and give me simplicity of visibility and policy definition of enforcement, leveraging most of my existing infrastructure. For example, Illumio Endpoint that we just launched leverages the existing operating system capabilities. For example, the host firewall that is part of Mac OS or Windows, and we instrument that and we make it easy for the user. We display the asset information, the flow information in a simple and easy to use interface. And then we do policy recommendations. So the user doesn't have to think, hey, how do I protect my environment? We say, hey, this is the best in class type of policy. Do you want to apply it? Right? So with that policy recommendation, automation, and leveraging the existing infrastructure, we help the security practitioners to deal with this hybrid environment, right? So we don't let them hanging and dealing with many different solutions. We simplify that.
Yeah, it's getting complex on its own enough, right? We don't need to compound the problem.
Exactly.
Certainly. Well, tell us about, so the endpoint security solution that's available now, that's shipping now. Can people go to the website and go get a demo or download a trial of it? How do people get a hold of this?
Absolutely. So please go to www.illumio.com, and you're going to see there our announcement and a link where you can try the solution. You can request a trial, and we'll help you test it. It's very easy to test, and it's a very easy interface, and you can be up and running in minutes with zero trust segmentation.
And I know Illumio works with a lot of large enterprises, so I imagine your endpoint solution is going to be pretty scalable as well.
Absolutely. Without naming any particular company, I will say that the largest organization in the world have already adopted Illumio. They're using it hundreds and hundreds of thousands of their hosts, their machines. So we're very confident that Illumio is going to be very performant and scalable.
Fantastic. Well, Mario, it's a pleasure talking with you. I hope you come back because this dialogue around zero trust and containment and kind of evolving our thinking around this is not over, right? It's a journey we're all on together. So please come back and tell us some more what's happening with Illumio and your customers.
Thank you so much, Mitch. I'm so thankful for this opportunity of talking to you, and I enjoy it a lot, but also to your audience. And as you said, this is just getting started. Zero trust segmentation is a technology that is getting massive adoption right now. I'm pretty sure we will talk again as Illumio continues to evolve. And I invite everybody, please, to come to www.illumio.com and take a look at our zero trust segmentation for the endpoint, Illumio endpoint.
Definitely check it out. Thanks again, Mario. We'll see you soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, it's a great pleasure being joined by Simon Jelly. Simon is General Manager, GM of SaaS Protection with Veritas Technologies. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Very nice to be here and have a discussion with you today.
Absolutely. Good topic. I'm excited to have this conversation. Before we jump into it, tell us a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about Veritas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm GM responsible. So I've for all of our SaaS protection here. It's obviously a big custom topic for organizations out there moving to leverage software as a service, whether it be for, I'm sure, applications exactly like this, right, that we're using today, Zoom, to talk to each other, or for their collaboration on email, increasingly moving there, especially with the move to working remotely, as we've all been through over the last 2.5 years. So that's my responsibility, is how do you think about protection, security, governance of information and data as you move to increasingly using software as a service. And it's an important topic for Veritas because we've been a leader in enterprise data management and data protection for over 30 years now, helping customers really protect their most critical assets as they go through using any kind of infrastructure out there, right? From physical to virtual to mainframe many years ago to now the cloud moving forwards.
Mm-hmm. Well, our landscape of solutions that we employ, whether it's deploying applications or productivity tools or whatever, it's never one thing, right? It's a complex mix of SaaS services. Maybe we even have our own SaaS. We're writing applications. We're building on platforms using cloud services. There's all kinds of things. Of course, that leads us to this idea of shared responsibility model. But shared responsibility doesn't mean no responsibility. It all ultimately falls back on us, right? Even if we're working with a SaaS provider who also has a role in that shared responsibility model. So I'd love to hear your views on that.
Yeah, so I think I'm really pleased to be talking this topic because I think a lot of people, when they move to software as a service or quote unquote the cloud, I think the good thing is that we're moving away from thinking about, am I buying features and functions and capabilities, to a lot of organizations look to the cloud and SaaS because they want to buy the outcome, right? They want to buy the ability to collaborate with someone remotely, or the ability to very easily log in and log their customer records management. So that's great. And it's a great evolution in terms of really taking away the need for organizations to have to build the outcome themselves from the combination of software and hardware. Now they can get it delivered to them directly as a service. That's a fantastic, obviously, why they're growing so rapidly, right? I think you heard Microsoft with Teams grow over 200% in the time over the pandemic itself. But I think what often organizations miss is exactly the point you made around there's a shared responsibility in buying and deploying that service. And what that means is, while the organization you're purchasing that software, be it Microsoft or from Salesforce or from whomever you're providing your service from, they provide guarantee of the service delivery, right? So the uptime of the service, it will be available to you as a service in terms of being available. It's fully redundant. If they have a failure in their data center, it's immediately, that's invisible to you. It continues running. They fail over to a different location. What they don't guarantee is still your responsibility is the data itself, right? What you choose to store on and use that service for is ultimately still your responsibility, right? They provide no guarantees in terms of being able to recover that data. So if we all mess with data all day long, and if we accidentally delete that calendar entry, there's no guarantees to get that back. And so from accidental deletion to ransomware attacks are obviously a big rise in cybersecurity overall. They don't provide guarantees in terms of being able to get data back in those cases. And then, the search and discovery of that data as well, right? From a legal compliance, if you need to get historic copies of that data back, that's a big topic, obviously, with the increase in privacy regulation, thinking about data sovereignty itself. how do you manage those things as increasingly the data sits within those services? So really it's about as I think about it and describe it to organizations, the service itself, yes, the service provider will provide that guarantee of uptime, the service being available to you. But the data that you're sharing and using within that service, storing that service, is ultimately your responsibility. And all the traditional things you thought about for on-premise, right? Security, governance, protection, backup recovery. You have to think about those as much as you did in the quote unquote on-prem world as you do now within the cloud.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's usually the situation where some event has happened, right? We need to go recover that data. We did something, we had an incident, whatever it might be. And that's when we all read those EULAs really closely, right? Well, at least our legal teams usually do. But that's when you discover, like, oh, you don't guarantee recovery of the data. Oh, you only keep 30 days. We need 60, or whatever it might be. And so that's the trap we fall into, because it's just so easy to click on something.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we've certainly met organizations, and you've seen some well publicized that, as you said, they found out what the EULA said after the event, right? When it came to, we've already lost the data or had the disaster event, or unfortunately we've been succumbed to some kind of ransomware attack, is when they found out the small print that we can't get that data back. I think KPMG has been a good publicized case. They moved to leveraging Microsoft Stack and unfortunately had an outage and lost, I think it was over 140,000 users that lost access to a certain period of data, and there was no guarantee of recovery, right? The fine print made it clear it was their responsibility to have provided that recovery service, and that's not something they've set up. So I'm sure they're investing in that now as they move forwards to the cloud, and investing further in as a service in making sure they're thinking about that moving forwards.
Yeah, I know some folks there that were there kind of using this as now we got to do it right. Let's show how you do it right.
Right.
So you learn those lessons, but sometimes in a very hard or sometimes costly way. Well, tell us about, Veritas has been around for a while. It's not new to this market, of course, thinking about backup solutions and data recovery. How do you think about that in a cloud environment, especially multiple providers, right? It's not all sitting in my data center or my off-prem.
Yeah.
Co-location center. It's everywhere, right? It's in everybody's service that I'm connected to and using. So it's not 2 or 3, it's probably 20 or 30.
Yeah. So number one, we think about it really as just an extension to the IT landscape you're trying to manage. The reality of what we've stood for, as you mentioned, many, many years, is how do we bring complexity under control? The reality is you've always had, and many organizations have always had many different types of applications, from productivity to data management tools. And they've, obviously I like to say, IT has this regular kind of refreshing cycle. We've gone from mainframe to client server to virtualization, now as a service and cloud. And nothing ever truly dies, right? There's probably some.
It doesn't go away, yeah.
Nothing ever goes away. So really being able to provide that continuity. So number one, we think about it as managing complexity, right? We take a single platform approach. So while we're looking at how do we innovate around being able to capture in the most effective way SaaS data, that's built on top of our existing what we call net backup platform. So where we've managed for 95 of the Fortune 100, we manage their data today. We're adding the ability to capture SaaS as part of that, and drive through a single pane of glass the ability to govern and understand, one, do I have a governance view of that data? Can I see that it's been protected? When was the last copy of that data protected? And then obviously the ability to drive recoveries, test drive recoveries, do ransomware recovery rehearsal events. That's a big topic these days for customers, knowing they can recover. Unfortunately, the ransomware topic has given birth to it's not when, but it's not if, but it's when you're going to get attacked from a ransomware. So there's a lot more of proactive preparation that we're seeing customers doing these days as well. And again, folding it into that kind of single platform, single protection strategy event is really the focus that we take to making that overall. And I think, ultimately, when we talk about cloud and SaaS, you've already kind of alluded to this. Many people think about it as one thing. The reality is it's very much not. I think I saw a stat the other day where over the average is well over 50 different types of SaaS or cloud applications that most organizations have deployed, and for good reason, right? They're specialized to different types of use cases, different types of needs for the business, but they all ultimately need to be protected because they're all succumb to this shared responsibility model.
And just name the categories of kinds of software that you're using likely in a SaaS scenario, and maybe my 20 to 30, that might fit the categories, not necessarily the number of services. Right. I'm not surprised to hear your number of 50. Well, as you engage with customers, I know you have a lot of existing customers, and as you talk to new customers, thinking about how do they maybe revamp their strategy, their backup strategy, their recovery, their business continuity plans. If I was on someone else's solution and was looking for new, better options, how do you have that conversation with them to now, let's think about it this way. If you're going to build this, let's build it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think number one, it starts a lot with this conversation we're having around education on the shared responsibility model. It's still surprising to me, certainly, that people again make that assumption that they're getting the outcome and everything's built into that. So a lot of the time actually just educating that the basics of data protection, good data governance is still something they need to think about as a strategy moving to the cloud. Obviously what we promote is then, look, it's great that you have protection in place, but what you want to have is consistent policy consistently applied if you're going to meet your regulation, your governance needs. It's not effective if you've got multiple point solutions trying to address your SaaS applications versus your virtual applications, etc. One, because it becomes very complex to manage that, right? How do you audit where to go for the recovery? It's a different tool set each time, right? So it's very difficult from a training and kind of standardization of procedures perspective. But more importantly, particularly if you're a regulated organization, you're dealing with things like SEC or even new data privacy regulations like the US government's Cloud Act. They recently revamped that to apply to data not just in the US, but outside the US as well. You've got to have a means to consistently show that you don't just have a policy, but it is consistently applied. And obviously, if you're trying to do that through multiple tool sets, we did a study a few years back now, but at that time it showed that most organizations have on average 4 different data protection solutions in place, right? And some much more than that. It can come pretty complex in terms of doing that. So one, standardizing on a single platform is what we drive customers towards. And a lot of that, again, is just to manage the complexity, take cost out of the equation. But particularly as they move to software as a service, yes, standard backup and recovery is kind of all the values of that in terms of protection against accidental deletion, against disaster recovery events, against ransomware protection. Those things we certainly help customers with. We can do, single level item to full disaster recovery with all of our different SaaS applications that we protect. But we're also helping, one key thing we are trying to help customers think about is the other big shift to SaaS or cloud is you're typically moving from a perpetual model, right, where you've kind of paid up front, it's all you can eat, everything's paid for, to a consumption model. Right? So in your SaaS application, you're potentially, you're paying by the meter, right, whether it be by the data volume or by the object count in terms of how much you're putting into that service. And that can have a big impact on your, for example, with SharePoint, there's no tiered management built within that storage. So you can really get into a situation where you're paying large overage costs if you don't manage the storage. What we can provide as an extension to our data protection capabilities is the tiered storage management, right? A, identify what data you don't need to keep and just completely purge it out. And then B, be able to tier that storage down to the lowest cost tiered storage as effectively as possible. And then the third element we often talk to customers about is, they often are driven by the business users to particular SaaS applications, and they're being driven there rapidly, right? And we've, again, seen the growth of SaaS, particularly from a productivity and collaboration perspective during the COVID pandemic. They haven't had a lot of time to think about what does that mean from a strategic choice perspective, right? Which cloud is for them, which SaaS app is for them. So providing portability and mobility between clouds is another strength of ours that we build into our application and into our platform. so that customers can, they can invest, they can make that rapid business choice. They know their data is protected. They know we're helping manage the cost around the cloud, but they also know that we're providing accessibility and mobility of the data, and all of the search and indexing, data governance, compliance. They can also hang off that as well. So those tend to be the a lot of it is educating in terms of the bigger. What's the bed you're making for yourself, as it were, that you're getting into, and ensuring that you've got an insurance policy that's not just about recovery, but again about managing costs, managing accessibility, managing governance overall.
So one final question, we're just about out of time here. I'm curious your thoughts on, as you look forward, how are things, we've talked about like being in the cloud, like in an PaaS environment and run in SaaS applications. We haven't talked really about cloud native. We haven't talked about infrastructure as code, where things are dynamic. GitOps can sort of dynamically, declaratively define these environments. DevOps, microservices, things that let us do software much more quickly and more dynamically, right? We may be doing multiple releases a day or a week or whatever. Our infrastructure could be changing dynamically, without us even knowing it. We know the SaaS providers change it without us knowing it. How does that inform or change, or influence your kind of backup strategy?
Yeah, this is, it's exciting, right? The future in terms of what it could enable for people. And you think about the higher order jobs that people can go focus their innovation and talents on by automating. We're largely actually taking a very similar path. So we've announced recently a strategy we call automated data management. And it's very much focused on, look, you declare a tier of protection that you need for your organization for different types of data. And then as data comes into the organization that we essentially pattern match to that, how you've described it, we'll automatically provide and protect that data. Because again, the traditional world we've been, where we provide a tool set that then you define the policies around, you have to manually kind of match the data to our protection. That isn't going to sustain us moving forwards, right? It's just not feasible. So automated data management is all about us putting all the smarts we've already had around data protection and recovery, but making it automated to a bronze, silver, gold tier of policy. That's what you set. Then we go and automate. And a lot of that we already have, right? So in an example of that in our SaaS protection today, new users that come into the organization, as long as they're put into the right groups of users, will automatically protect that with the protection tier that you've already put there. And that's the kind of concepts we're taking forwards. We're also looking at autonomy around understanding what data is being accessed most often, and then making sure that we put that closest to where it needs to be from a recovery time, right? And if we see the data go offline, if we see issues within our appliances that where the disk is failing, we're automating the recovery of those, the replacement of that hardware, the replacement of those services. Again, automated data management is certainly where we're going in response to a lot more of this automated world that we're living overall.
And all the rest of the pipeline is getting automated too. It's not already there, so it makes a lot of sense. Well, Simon, I'd love to have you come back. We'd love to delve into that some more. Fascinating topic. Where can folks, we've covered a lot of ground, where can folks go find out more about Veritas, maybe see some of the solutions or options that you have, or trying them out, buying them, etc.?
Absolutely. So we actually just everything available on Veritas.com. We do actually, just a quick shout out, we do actually have a big event coming up, a virtual event that you can go on Veritas.com and register live for on October 19th. We have our third iteration of what we call Conquer Every Cloud. So how do we help you move to the cloud with confidence and do all these things like protection, governance, ransomware protection that we've talked about. So if you go to Veritas.com, you'll find where to register for that.
Climb every mountain, conquer every cloud. We should have asked with your event on the 19th. Simon and Jelly, great talking with you with Veritas Technologies. Hope you come back again soon.
I would love to. Thanks for the time, Mitch.
You bet.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Inotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Inotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Inotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Inotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Greg Murphy, who's the CEO for Order, and we're going to be talking about IoT security and what are the challenges and what's going on in this whole space. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Really a pleasure to be here with you today.
We've been talking about IoT security now for a while, and we've been talking about IoT. But maybe you could explain for a couple of seconds here at least, what is making this more difficult than any other security challenge we may have encountered over the years? Is there something unique about this particular space, or is it simply just a matter of size and scope?
It's a matter of size and scope, but there are some unique challenges when it comes to IoT devices. So you just think about the sheer volume of these devices is growing kind of exponentially year over year, where your traditional IT estate, if you think about your laptops and your mobile phones and tablets, those are typically driven by growth in employees or number of people, whereas the IoT devices are really growing. That's being driven by just the pace of innovation. The number of sensors, cameras, connected devices is expanding exponentially. So the attack surface from a security perspective is growing very, very fast. The other thing that I think is somewhat unique about IoT devices is that they tend to have useful lives that are measured in many years, unlike a typical IT device where you might think of a laptop or a mobile phone that's going to be around for 2 or 3 years. If you think about healthcare, you may have MRI imaging systems that are designed for a 15-year life, and similarly you'll find that in manufacturing as well. And so you end up with a lot of highly variable devices, with many generations of technology and operating systems, and that makes for a very challenging kind of defense environment from a security perspective.
A lot of these devices are also managed by people who are in what we call the operations technology side of the house, and they may not have as much security expertise as the traditional IT folks do. So is there a disconnect between the cultures who are managing these organizations and what needs to happen in terms of cybersecurity?
Yeah, you do find sometimes that there are disconnects in culture and in goals. If you look at folks on the OT side of the house, whether you're talking manufacturing or healthcare, they are typically very, very focused on reliability and performance and uptime. And the worst thing that can happen if you're in the OT world and you're responsible for keeping the pepperoni slicer running at a manufacturing facility, if that device goes down, you're losing your production capacity, and that is money in your pocket, money out the door. Whereas you think of the folks on the IT side of the house are typically more focused on things like security. Like they are responsible for protecting the corporation's data and the assets. And so they have different priorities that they approach the conversation with. And really part of the challenge here is providing a common set of solutions, common technologies and platforms that can serve the needs of both of those organizations, that can help the OT organizations keep the devices operational and running while providing the IT and the security organizations with the visibility and the control they need to ensure that the corporation's data and their assets are protected adequately.
Is there some sort of centralized IT team that's taken over responsibility for securing these devices, or are we just trying to figure out a way to make the OT guys do it more efficiently?
There have been, in some organizations we deal with, there have been some shifts in organizational structure, where we see as more and more of these IoT and OT devices are being connected, and security and cybersecurity becomes kind of one of the critical considerations. We see operational responsibility sometimes shifting under the CIO and the CISO. But that's, we're in the early days of that. That's certainly not, the case in every organization we're dealing with. And I think there's going to be a mix, of different approaches to this problem. And I think the key here is making sure that all of these different groups are using common data and common information, that we don't have the OT organization with its own set of inventory and asset records, and the IT organization with theirs, because then you're in a constant game of having to reconcile one database against another, and potentially conflicting information. The key is getting one common system and platform that can say, okay, here is the inventory of the devices that we have. Here's the software that's running on those devices, the vulnerabilities that might be associated with those devices, and make that information visible to everybody in a shared fashion. So that's one of the things that we really emphasize is how do you use a common platform as opposed to siloed tools, which always creates conflict, and a huge challenge in reconciling disparate information.
We've been at IoT now for a couple of years at least in any meaningful kind of effort, but are we chasing after this from a security perspective yet again, or are we trying to get in front of this?
I think there's a lot of effort to get in front of this, and you've started to see that even in some of the regulatory programs that are coming out of the U.S. federal government, out of standards bodies, pushing manufacturers to adopt kind of standard best practices in enabling security capabilities in the solutions that they bring to market. So there is an effort to make sure that you look across the broad spectrum of industries, an effort to make sure that best practices are being followed. But this is always going to be a very complex area where you have multiple, literally hundreds or thousands of manufacturers that are supplying, a hospital, a manufacturing organization, and trying to make sure that common practices are being used across all of those manufacturers is always going to be a challenge. So I think there is an effort, from a regulatory perspective to get ahead of this, but it's also very incumbent on the manufacturers, on the healthcare providers and others to implement visibility and monitoring tools so they understand what's in their environment, that they understand their risks and vulnerabilities so that they can ensure that they're taking appropriate steps to protect themselves.
We've been talking about the chronic shortage of cybersecurity people for quite some time now. Is this just going to get worse as we kind of go into this whole realm of IoT security where there are thousands of endpoints?
Yeah, I think that it poses very unique challenges when you have the number of endpoints that is increasing so dramatically, which means the attack surface is getting larger and larger. And I've never heard any CISO say that it's easy for them to attract cybersecurity talent in their organizations to be able to implement plans to address these kinds of challenges. I think the real way out of this, frankly, and the only way out of this is to enable automation. If you have someone comes into work in the morning, needs to look at a console and has a list of 9,000 blinking red lights, of vulnerabilities and no ability to understand, the priority, the impact of those, it's going to be impossible for them to get their job done. The real key here is how do we automate routine tasks, and how do we help organizations understand the true risks and vulnerabilities, so when they come in the morning, they can look and say, okay, here are the top priority, the most significant vulnerabilities. And by the way, these are ones that I can do something about because there is a patch that I can apply. There's a remediation, a step that I can take, as opposed to just sitting back and admiring the Christmas tree that is lit up with all of the red lights.
The bad guys, are they tracking these deployments? Are they starting to launch unique attacks aimed specifically at them? And what's the level of sophistication that's required for them to compromise an IoT environment?
The truth of the matter is, if you look at the attacks, the simplest and easiest attacks for any adversary, is very often not to go after the IoT devices themselves. It's to get an employee of the organization to open an email to go someplace they can't. The problem is that once these adversaries are inside the network, the way networks are designed, it's often very easy for them to traverse from penetrating an employee laptop into and getting into critical infrastructure. And that's really the problem. Is it's very easy for adversaries to move laterally across networks, and so the blast radius of an incident when it happens can be quite large. And we are seeing, just this week, we saw the Los Angeles Unified School District. The adversaries are paying attention. They know, that the day on which the school starts for the year, they know that the IT organization is probably going to be stretched, helping teachers, students get connected, doing all of the start of the year activities. And so they know when organizations are most vulnerable. They're just looking for weak spots and looking to do the things that are most disruptive. And very often, if I can get to critical infrastructure, if I can get to your building systems, if I can impact the AC, if I can impact the ability to use online medical systems and critical medical devices, I can shut down a hospital, I can shut down a school or a manufacturing plant to prevent them from having normal day-to-day operations. And that's going to put them in a very vulnerable position where they're very likely to pay me the ransom that I'm demanding. So I think you kind of think of the adversaries as chaos junkies. All they want to do is get into the network and cause as much challenge, as much operational difficulty as they can, because they know that that's going to create a vulnerability for the organization that needs to be addressed very quickly.
It seems like the malware is getting nastier as well, because nation states are attacking critical infrastructure, and then that malware gets shared, and the next thing you know, it's on some as a service platform. So will this just become more routine, where we should expect every, 9 months that there'll be another rev of malware that's a little more lethal than the previous generation, and it becomes kind of some version of Moore's law for cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think it's a scary prospect when you see nation states that are applying significant resources into penetrating particular organizations. But the thing that's even scarier for me is just the commercialization of this, and how relatively easy it is for even non-sophisticated actors to get their hands on malware, to be able to use and exploit that in a fairly routine way. You have to think of the people that are scaring me most. The nation states are always out there, but it's these ransomware gangs that operate as rational businesses, and they're going out there and they're looking and trying to say which are the most vulnerable organizations that have the least resources to apply to defending themselves, where we can get in quickly, cause chaos, and force them to pay a ransom or to take some action that we win. So it's that the profit motive that motivates a lot of these bad actors is scary, because it means that there is no organization out there that's safe. You might think to yourself, oh, I'm a mid-sized school district, or a relatively small rural community hospital, or a mid-sized manufacturer, and who's going to go after me? And the odds are it's probably not a nation state that's going to be targeting you, but if there's a ransomware gang that can spend a few $100s launching an attack, and they have a probability that they can get you to pay a $25, $50, $100,000 ransom, that's a pretty good business model. And so I think we need to make sure that that all of those types of organizations are equipped to understand their vulnerabilities and can be proactive about taking measures to defend themselves. Because as you put it, this problem's not going away. There will be continued innovation beyond the adversaries, and frankly, like any area, with innovation, it typically gets easier and easier for them to launch attacks. Once an attack has been successful, you tend to see it repeated over and over and over again. Just like in our business, we like to find products that we can sell and problems that we can solve for customers, and do that over and over again. The adversaries take that exact same approach.
Are there a set of best practices or things that people should be doing to get ready for IoT, to get in front of it? Or are there things that you wish that people would do, or for that matter, things that just make you shake your head when you see people either doing them or not doing them?
Yeah, I think there's really a focus on kind of the fundamentals, the basic hygiene here. First is making sure that you as an organization truly do have visibility to everything that's connected to your environment, because by definition, the most vulnerable device is the device that you, as an IT practitioner, as a CISO, don't know is connected, because you're probably not taking many steps to protect that device. If you don't know it's there, you're probably not patching it. You're probably not following all of the manufacturer's recommendations. And so we find this all the time. There are devices in a hospital environment that maybe were brought in by a manufacturer rep that were connected to the guest network of the hospital for a brief demo and got left in the environment. That you find that doctors have connected their Teslas to the enterprise and to the network environment. Those types of things, if you're not aware of them, can be significant risks. So we put a real emphasis on visibility. Know what's in your environment. Know what the vulnerabilities are associated with those devices. And then make sure that you're applying good cyber hygiene. You want to make sure that you don't have a critical device, that critical manufacturing device or a medical device that's sitting on the guest network that could be vulnerable to anybody who comes into the environment. So making sure that you've got visibility, and making sure that you understand the vulnerabilities of devices, and that you're doing the basic measures to segment devices so you don't have a flat network where it becomes, once malware gets into an environment, it can traverse very laterally across the entire enterprise and impact every aspect of operations. So the more segmentation that you can apply, the more you can control the blast radius of any incident that occurs. And if you have those fundamental kind of building blocks in place, you're a lot better off when you're facing the adversaries like we are today.
All right. Lastly, we hear a lot about AI. Will AI come and save us from ourselves, or is that just all wishful thinking?
I think that there is a role that AI plays and machine learning plays. The good news when you think about IoT devices, their behavior patterns tend to be fairly predictable and deterministic. A video surveillance camera connected to your environment doesn't wake up on Wednesday morning and suddenly decide that it's going to communicate to a new destination or to use a new protocol. Once you understand what these devices are, you can use things like machine learning and AI to build behavioral models. Okay, now we know what a video surveillance camera, when connected in this manufacturing environment, what it typically does day after day after day. And that makes it possible to flag an anomalous behavior. Hey, we've got a video surveillance camera that is suddenly reaching out to communicate to a server in Russia that we have never seen a video surveillance camera communicate with before. That's the type of thing where AI, where machine learning can be very valuable in detecting anomalies and alerting the organization that something different is happening here. But all of that said, that's not going to substitute for having done the basic hygiene, having an organization, having a strategy in place to make sure that you're seeing all of these devices, that you're segmenting your networks and so forth. So AI isn't going to be the silver bullet that solves, but it can be a very useful tool in making sure that you're focusing the organization's attention on the most critical vulnerabilities and that you're identifying vulnerabilities that are being exploited as soon as humanly possible.
All right. Well, guys, it's one more case of eternal vigilance all the way out to the edge and back. Greg, thanks for being on the show.
Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for putting a spotlight on this topic. It's really important.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for joining. We're here with Maitin Markardia, who's the CEO for Evolveware, and we're talking about application modernization. Maitin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
It seems like application modernization is so much in the eye of the beholder that it's not quite clear that everybody's talking about the same thing at the same time. It could be anything from I slapped a new GUI on the front end of something to I rewrote the entire application to be cloud native and it runs on Kubernetes these days. So what is your sense of what do people mean by the phrase app modernization these days, and what runs the gamut of that term?
Well, so Mike, I would say that up until 3 years back, when the cloud was still in its very, very infancy, app modernization meant anything from just slapping a GUI to emulation. And most people at the time were really thinking about, shaving costs by getting off the mainframe or addressing the shrinking talent pool. But with the advent of the cloud, and also the talent pool shrinking even further, people are now looking at true application modernization. And what I mean by that is taking their existing legacy system and not just placing some layer on top of it, but actually converting it into modern technologies so that they can take advantage of the cloud environment. They can take advantage of, the new, shall I say, I'd say the new set of people coming into the IT industry. So, in terms of support and development.
Mm-hmm. And as part of that, are people rewriting applications, or are they kind of slicing them up into microservices? And what part of this equation are they actually struggling with?
Well, I think what they're really struggling with is when they try and initiate an application modernization project without a proper methodology and a proper set of processes, that's when they struggle. It's not what type of application modernization they're struggling with. It's how it's being approached. There are some people who are thinking, maybe it's just a magic bullet and it can be done very quickly. There are very few issues that will come up because maybe that's what they're being fed, but that's really not true. What we've seen is if you take a phased approach to modernization, and we had a call with a very large research company just today itself, and we were discussing the same thing, that if a client takes the effort or makes the effort to understand the current state of their application and then take a decision on how they want to modernize it. Do they want to extract the business rules and rewrite it? Or do they want to just migrate old legacy code to new legacy code? That approach, if they take that decision after they have gone through and reviewed their current state of the application, it helps a lot because then they're taking the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, go ahead.
Well, what is the right decision? Because sometimes, do I modernize the application at all, or should I just rip and replace it, or should I maybe write something entirely new that's maybe different or better?
So, really, I look at that also. If you replace it, it's an application modernization, because what you really have to do is you're replacing it with a modern system. And it's not something where you just say, let me just remove or retire the old system without even worrying about what I was running, because then you are forced into accepting the logic and the rules in the new system. And typically over the years, you've added some homegrown rules. So even in a situation like this, you want to extract the business rules from your old application, compare it to the rules that are existing in the new modern platform that you are trying to replace it with. And then if there are any deltas or any differences, then you want to take those rules and add them into the modern platform so that you're actually running a system you really want to run. So I call that also application modernization, which is extraction of rules, exporting the ones you need into the new platform.
And what's driving the need to go do this? Is it digital business transformation initiatives, or is there some other factors at work here, whether it's technical debt or whatever else it might be?
Well, there is definitely a technical debt issue. There is a security issue. But I think what's really driving this, of course, security being very important, is you really do not have talent or you do not have support personnel that are available to manage your old applications. And, people who understand those old applications are probably in their 60s. I have actually met a company where the youngest person managing one of their financial applications is a 76-year-old lady. So it tells you that that is really there is an urgency, because how long are these people going to continue to want to come to work and manage your application? That's one. And then, of course, there is this the drive to reduce cost by going to the cloud and being able to share certain services. I think there's a multitude of reasons why application modernization is important today, rather than waiting for it for tomorrow.
Do programming languages play a role in this? Because sometimes a lot of the folks who wrote a certain application are, to your point, heading for retirement. So am I going to be able to find somebody who can maintain an application if all the kids are writing in a different language?
Very true. And which is why I'm saying that the people who support these old legacy applications and who understand the language, the legacy languages, once they are gone and are not available, if you're still continuing to run those applications, you're in a mess, because you won't be able to update any business policies. You will not have someone to manage or even maintain those applications in its status quo. So the earlier, the better. Mm-hmm. Because think about it, if you're in your 60s already, and say 10 years down the road, it'll be even worse.
To that point, are organizations that modernize going to be more agile because they have a code base that's a little more modular and easier to mix and match different components and APIs, and they will ultimately have a more tangible business benefit from having done all this work versus just doing it for the sake of science?
Correct. Plus a reduction in cost, recurring cost, an ability to share and optimize their systems with their vendors and clients. So number of advantages.
What do you think is the biggest challenge these organizations are having from a staffing perspective and finding people to go do all this stuff? And is it something that I just hire a bunch of consultants? Because frankly, I'm only going to do it a couple of times. It's not really an ongoing set of skills, or is application modernization forever?
I would say that at least for the near future, you need to look at, as I would call it, agile modernization, meaning it's modernization that's going to continue as part of a broad initiative until you retired your old applications, or you've converted them, or you've, shall I say, merged them. And so I think you have to take this as one which doesn't make sense to just hire a bunch of consultants alone, but you need to be vested in this process, at least vested to the point where you've taken the right decisions and you have been a party to the decisions regarding the approach and the processes. I think that's very critical.
When I talk to people, one of the things they seem to struggle with is the data that they have is so tied to the application, very hard to untangle the two. And so how do I get in there and kind of say, all right, well, we want to keep the data, but the data has so many hooks to the old application that it's just too hard to remove. So is that a factor in my decision process, or is there some clean way of migrating the data out?
So, what we have seen is there are some companies who actually migrate their data first, move it to a modern database that can communicate with the legacy applications. And then they actually migrate the applications or modernize the applications, with selected modules having different priorities. But data is a very critical piece of this. I mean, data runs the show.
Mm-hmm. We have also seen the rise of containers, and some people will encapsulate an entire legacy application, throw some APIs around it, and say, over time we'll slice and dice this thing. But are there different paths to modernizing applications that take advantage of containerization, or should I just not do that because all I did was take my very large piece of code and stick it in a isolated box with an API somewhere?
I'm not sure if that really works, putting it into an isolated box. Again, as I said, it really will depend on what your application is doing for you and whether you can say, all right, I'm going to separate this from the rest of my environment and just run it on its own. I don't think that's an option generally that you will find as workable.
Do you worry that so many organizations will fail that basically we'll just get a blowback against the whole idea, and people will say, well, let's not bother with that because it's just too career threatening?
Well, what would they do if they don't bother? I think they have to do something about their applications because it's running their organization, right? The operations. And so you don't want to be running in a fashion where your IT budgets are going through the roof simply because you're unwilling to, shall I say, pay the attention and the time and effort to modernize your environment. I think that would be a fallacy. I think if they spend the time, again, I'm repeating myself, Mike, but if they spend the time in finalizing an approach and a set of processes, and you do it by doing a pilot, and you make sure that you're getting the results that you're looking for, I think then your chances of success are actually quite good. And we are seeing that.
So to your point then, do I need to think about application modernization more as a continuous process rather than just an event that happens from time to time? And for that matter, we're always continuously modernizing applications because we'll see new technologies coming over the horizon already. Maybe we need to just think about it as something that happens on a continuum.
Yes, I think modernization is a continuous process, but I think the level of modernization may change, once you've taken care of the true legacy applications that are now 30, 40 years old. Remember, those people did not embark on any modernization probably for the last 20 years. And so now you've got a big chunk of work that is pending. If IT takes modernization as part of the regular process, which is, you go through the life cycle for each application from maintenance to modernization, and it continues as for each application as the right time arrives, then you're not going to see this urgency that I think we are beginning to see right now, especially with state governments, large insurance and financial companies, because there is now an urgency at their end.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it here. Applications essentially come in a freshness state. You need to keep that in mind because they will go stale and start to taste bad. Hey, Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some great interviews with industry professionals to update you on what's happening in the tech world. We'll be back again on Thursday, so we hope to see you then. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.